Well, hello there, and welcome to this episode of The Terri Cole Show. I'm so happy you're here. I'm going to start with a question. Do you ever shrink or freeze or overreact when you're dealing with authority figures? Could be a boss, could be a professor, even a doctor, right? If you're not in your head, you're not alone, and I am doing an episode on this because I am way deep into writing my father wound book. And for many women in particular, all people as well, but I'm mostly focused on women, especially if you have unhealed father wounds, authority figures can really trigger deep emotional responses that don't always make sense in the moment. You're like, why am I feeling this way? So today in this episode, I'm going to be breaking down the why it happens, how it shows up in your life the most, and most importantly, what can you do to sort of shift this dynamic? Because obviously, it's not a fantastic dynamic. I can tell you from personal experience, being afraid of people in authority can really negatively impact the quality of your life, but especially your career. So before we get into it, if you're new to this YouTube channel, please subscribe. Like, what are you doing? I'm giving you free stuff every single week. All you got to do is subscribe. So I'll wait. Okay. Good job. And thanks for doing it, because I also want to make sure that you're getting the alerts, right? Hit the bell icon so that you get notified every time I roll out something new, which is twice a week, every Tuesday, every Thursday, and sometimes even on Saturdays. All right, let's move it on into today's episode. So I want to start by sharing what I've been doing. I've been writing this book on father wounds for the past year and a half. And so I've been diving deep into my own experience and into lots of client experiences. And I also have a father wound course. So I have 600 women who are acting as sort of a test group for me around, I want to know what their experiences are. I want to know your experience too. But it was very helpful as I was writing the book just to make sure I'm including the right stuff, so that the book is really life-changing for people who have an unhealed father wound. So let's start with the truth that millions of women carry the psychological and emotional injuries of a father wound that silently shape every relationship they get into. So it's not just your relationship with authority, but that is what we're going to be focusing on in this episode. So what is a father wound? How do we get it? So a father wound is from growing up with a father or a father figure, because it could have been a grandfather or an uncle that raised you, or a stepfather, who was absent or abusive, controlling, immature, or emotionally unavailable, or not like absent at all. And that could be absent because of death or incarceration. Like, there's lots of reasons, right? And this can create unconscious patterns. So we end up attracting emotionally unavailable partners, or we stay in toxic relationships. This devastating impact, though, reaches far beyond romantic relationships, which is why we're talking about authority figures today. So it affects friendships, work dynamics, how you parent, and really your relationship with yourself. So what does it do, right? If you have a father wound, and each person is going to express itself differently, where maybe it shows up in your romantic lives, but maybe it shows up in your work life as well. So there's obviously, I'm writing a whole book about it, or rewriting it right now because we're in the final edit. So I'm going to be sharing lots of information, but I wanted you to think about in your own life, if you're watching this because you feel identified with having some kind of a father wound, I want you to think about what kind of father did you have, or was your father completely absent? Was your father not there? And you can drop it in the comments, But to be succinct, a father wound is emotional, mental, and relational impact left when your relationship with your father or father figure was neglectful, abusive, dismissive, overly critical, or completely absent, or half absent, right? The name of the book is going to be Father Wound. Because here's the thing. If you have one, you know it. Even if everything looked great, if you didn't get it. So what happens, fathers, a lot of times, are our first experience with authority, especially if you were raised in a more traditional home, which hopefully that is changing more and more now. But a lot of people in my crew, we've already been raised, right? So I have people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 30s. So you're already grown up. And so if you were being raised in the 70s, 80s, 90s, there was a lot more traditional parenting roles then. I feel like there's been a lot of changes in the past, like 15 to 20 years, which hopefully that means better outcomes for daughters of fathers. But if your first relationship with an authority figure was your father, if that relationship, let's say, was unsafe, or it was unpredictable, or invalidating to you, your nervous system may still treat authority figures today as dangerous, even though they're not. Why is that bad? Well, because your script for the way that you're behaving now is like stuck in a past injury. So we need to get really clear about where we're doing it. So I had a client who had an unresolved father wound, which is what we were working on together. But for years, she avoided asking for a raise at work because she was afraid to upset her boss. She didn't want her boss to think she was ungrateful. So that's an interesting connection to make, that her wanting to be paid properly for her time, her education, her interests, what she was doing for the company, because she was really a rock star. She was a total workhorse, put in way more hours than was required. But this same client, as we first started working together, one of the things she brought to me was that she had not submitted her expense report, because she traveled for work and did all this stuff, for 8 months. And it was the same thing. She was afraid that her expenses were going to be scrutinized. Her boss was going to be mad. She was going to get in trouble. So in this scenario, we can see that the little kid with the unresolved father wound was running that client's career, that client's life. I had another client who was absolutely terrified of doctors. So she had a sadistic father who was very cruel to her. So in her life, she had attracted people in authority who were also cruel. A dentist who didn't care if she was crying while he was working on her teeth. And that may sound far-fetched to you. I swear to you, this is a true story. Like, you would think, why would someone stay? But again, if this cruel treatment was normalized, and if you had not yet sort of excavated the father wound and had a deeper understanding of what was going on, she didn't even know she could quit a bad medical person. She didn't even know. I was like, babe, fire him. Hello? You absolutely can fire him. She's like, are you sure? I was like, oh, I'm absolutely positive. And she eventually did, but it took us working through and honoring, identifying, integrating her father wound experience in order for her to get up the strength to do that. And this is the same thing that happened with my first client, that we had to unearth what was happening because she was having a transference. And what we're describing, again, this is another way of the way that an unhealed or an unintegrated father wound can affect us, is that we are having a transference, meaning our now behavior is being driven, as I said before, by unresolved pain or injury from the past. So another place where you may feel it is in social groups, right? You may feel resentful towards someone who is like a self-appointed leader of the group, or someone who asserts themselves, someone who sort of takes social authority, right? It could just be a social group, but there is always some kind of pecking order, like you see it. There's always someone who's leading a group. A lot of times they're the person who's initiating plans. They're the ones who are planning the vacations together, whatever the thing is. And you may find yourself feeling resentful of, or again, intimidated by that person. So these are all scenarios, and you can have your own scenario of being afraid of authority figures. So if any of this resonates with you, please know that it makes perfect sense if you have an unhealed father wound, right? This is we're sort of reenacting a blueprint. So nothing is wrong with you. It's just that something needs your attention, which is what this episode of the Terri Cole Show is about. And it's also what my entire book that comes out in September 2026 is going to be all about. So let's talk a little bit about why this happens. So back to the transference, right? Authority figures unconsciously remind us of our dads or our father figure, let's say. So what would we use here? You could use, and I'll put this in the guide, just go to terricole.com/guide. We can use the 3 Qs for clarity, which is the little tool that I created, and I share it in a lot of these videos because it actually is incredibly helpful for you to identify when you're having an unconscious transference, which means someone in some way is reminding you of someone or something from the past. And so you are feeling activated, like your activation is more amplified because of that. So it's important. When I finally was able to identify, for me, I had a boss that I was terrified of in grad school. I've told this story before. I've told it in the book. I won't torture you guys with it again. But it was where I was doing an internship at a drug treatment clinic. And I was terrified of my boss. But the way it came out is I complained about him all the time to my therapist until she finally got me to describe him and then said, who else does that sound like? And I couldn't believe how exactly like my father this guy was. And that's how it was so obvious to me once she said it. But when you're in it, people, it feels so real that I don't think if I hadn't been in therapy at that time, I don't think I would have identified it myself. It's important to know though, because we don't want to be making decisions in our adult lives driven by our 10-year-old fearful child within us, right? Because those are probably not going to be the best decisions for your career. Another reason that it happens is that we have this nervous system imprint, right? So early experiences wire our stress responses, which is why it's so important in any relationship. But firstly, with your relationship with yourself, that you understand what are your stress responses? What are your activation points, right? I was with people the other day and one of my kids, grown man kid, was visiting, and Charlie was doing something like smelling in his bag or something, and he said no, kind of firmly, and she didn't really listen. But then he yelled, and I immediately said, absolutely not. And he was like, oh no? I go, no, do not yell at her like that. He was like, okay. And I realized later how activating it was for me. Anybody raising their voice is absolutely terrifying. And not because I was raised in a home with a lot of screaming. I was raised in a home where nobody was allowed to scream. So it's absolutely jarring to my nervous system still. And it was not a big deal. He wasn't mad. I wasn't mad. But it's funny how I couldn't have stopped myself from reacting and responding that way. So know about your own stress responses. And I'll give you a couple of questions that you can ask in the guide so that you start to get an idea, especially around authority figures. What is your stress response? And then the last reason why it happens is it's learned behavior, right? If speaking up in your family of origin with your father figure led to punishment or rejection, then silence feels safer, right? You think back to how conditioned we were by the childhood homes that we grew up in. And so you make sense, is all I'm saying. So whatever is happening for you, if you identify with this, we can untangle it. That's why I'm writing a whole book about it, babe. Like, it is untangleable, I promise you. It's just trying to get a deeper understanding of what's happening for you is super helpful. So you will now have the 3 Qs for clarity in your back pocket, and this can help to break the trance of transference. It really can bring you back right now to the here and now. So let's talk a little bit about other things that you can do. Awareness practices are always amazing. And again, you guys, to make it as easy as possible for you, I will put these thoughts and ideas in the guide for you. Just go to terricole.com /guide. So awareness practices. It can be anything from A, being dialed into when are you having an amplified response? And then name what happened, right? What happened right before that? And you can name it. If it is that the way that person just behaved reminds me of Dad, it's very helpful to use the words, to say it out loud, And we need to also prioritize self-validation, because a lot of what goes along with having a father wound is seeking external validation, right? So much of my young life was spent trying to get my father's attention and his approval. And I got to be honest and say mostly neither one of those things came. Mostly it didn't work what I was doing. But almost everything I was doing for that. I was incredibly ambitious, and I was literally like leaping up the Hollywood ladder in my young life. And just kind of looking back and being like, are you looking? Are you looking? Like I wanted him to be like amazing. But that didn't happen. Now, I healed my father wound in therapy anyway. So you don't need your father to participate, to think they did anything wrong, or even to be alive to heal this wound, which is why it's so important that you get dialed into the fact that if you have one, that it is something that needs your attention. So self-validation, it can be something as simple as my needs and opinions are valid. How I feel, what I want, what I think is important. Because it is. But we have to live our lives like that's true, right? And we have to do that in our relationships and in our work relationships and all of it. Other healthy things to do is have better boundaries, right? And you can start by setting boundaries in more like low stakes authority interactions. Like even, for example, if you're at a restaurant, right? Sending back the order for an adjustment if it isn't correct, right? Letting yourself make a wave, right? It's okay to. Or with your doctor, if you're someone who has this fear of doctor authority or MD authority, writing down 2 questions and just committing to yourself that you're going to ask those questions, right? Another thing to think about and that you can do is just, we really are, ultimately tasked with reparenting ourselves. And I know that's like so hard and just such a drag for some people to think of when you feel like you already effing raised yourself, for many people, which I get, but we have to do it, right? What do you wish your father had been capable of saying to you? I tell myself all the time, you're doing a good job. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of the person you are, because I am. But I hear that from me. So essentially in the last, 20 years of my therapeutic life, I've picked up sort of the mantle from my father, who wasn't doing it, and just started doing it for myself more. It's probably even 30 years ago, 25 years ago. I don't know. Time goes so fast, you guys. Anyway, there's also mirror work that you can do, where it's just really looking at yourself and being like, I've got you. Like, you're safe with me. It's safe for you to speak up because I have your back, Another thought is in getting into your body. There's a lot in the book, the new book, again, September 26th, where there'll be a lot of somatic exercises, meaning body-centric, right? So an easy one, which I'll put in the guide, is just 4x4 breathing, right? We inhale for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold it, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold it, 4, 3, 2, 1. That literally took 16 seconds, and it will help calm your nervous system so that you have a better shot of responding and not reacting. So if you struggle with authority figures, I want you to remember you are not that little girl anymore. And yes, she is alive inside of you, and it is your job to protect her. But you are grown. You have tools, right? You are allowed to take up space and have an opinion and say no and set limits, right? Because I want you to think about it this way. Your father wound may have shaped your past, but it 100% does not get to dictate your future. So let's do this journey together. You guys, let's do it together. I'm going to be talking about this for the next year, 2 years, 3 years, who knows how long. How long have I been talking about boundaries? Because once I'm interested in something, and for me, it's about how much it changed my life. So I'll be telling and sharing different stories about what happened in my own life, because obviously I'm just so motivated to share with you anything that helped lessen my own suffering. So if this resonated with you, drop a comment in any of the places. Like, what is your biggest challenge with authority figures right now? Because I would love to answer your questions and be of service. And if this hits home and you know you have a friend who's got a father wound, share it with your friend, right? Let's spread the healing all around, shall we? Anyway, thank you so much for being here with me today. I hope you have the most amazing week. Don't forget to go get your guide, terricole.com/guide. And as always, take care of you.